Hello everyone, my name is Alan Thorne and welcome to this 3D Motive video course. Here we'll be building modular environments in Blender that we'll end up importing into the Unity game engine to make expansive levels for our games. Let's take a look at the mesh environment here that we'll be making. I have this environment configured here in the Unity editor and it's ready for use in our game. Now at first sight it looks like one complete and integrated mesh. That's how it's supposed to look. But looks can be deceptive. Really, this environment is composed from many smaller and independent pieces. They only look integrated because I've intentionally modeled them all to fit together seamlessly with each other like building blocks. In this course, I'll show you how to make these kinds of environments effectively and how to import them optimally into Unity. Not only that, but I'll show you how to do it using tools that cost you and your business absolutely nothing. We'll see how to model and map environments in Blender, how to texture paint and prepare materials in GIMP, and then we'll import our meshes into Unity so they work with both the free and professional versions. So if you want to make game environments with infinite potential, then let's get started. Okay, so what I want to do ahead of time before we jump in and get modeling is to show you what we're going to be achieving in this course. So I'm here in Unity and I just want to show you the different level pieces that we're going to be making in this course so that you know what we will achieve. So here I've gone ahead and just built a very basic and small level from the different pieces that we're going to be modeling. Now this looks like one complete and integrated environment, but I've said already that actually it's made up from different independent pieces that we can fit together to really recombine in any way we want to create all kinds of different levels. So let's start having a look at the different pieces that we're going to be modeling. So right here I've got this floor piece that you can see here. So this is a square floor piece and this is tiled here, here, here and here. Again, we can rotate these pieces as much as we want and retile and combine them in different configurations. So I put this floor tile here. Now we've got another floor tile with this one here that we've got that can connect up against any of the other tile pieces. You'll see that any of these floor tiles can connect with and recombine with any of the other floor tiles. We've also got a corner piece here, so you can see we've got that corner piece. And this is really just reflected over here in this corner piece. This is the same mesh, we've just mirrored it to fit to the other side. And the same for these other corners over here. We've also got some straight sections here and we have some different variations. We have this straight section piece and we have this straight section piece as well for the edges. And again, we can recombine these in any order we want. We can flip them and mirror them up against any of the other pieces. So in essence, these are the different pieces that we're going to be modeling. We've also got these outward corner pieces here, which will allow us to turn the wall outwards to along corridor sections. So these are the different pieces that... So in this movie, I want to discuss the control scheme for Blender. And here I am at the Blender welcome screen. Now you can see from the welcome dialog that I'm using Blender 2.68a, which at the time of recording is the latest version. It may be that when you're watching this video you may be using a later version, and if you are, that's okay. You will probably have a different image here, but otherwise the setup will be pretty much the same. So the very first time you start Blender you'll have this interface with this color scheme here and this welcome dialog. And what I want to do here is to set the control scheme for Blender. Now you can see here in this interaction section, in this drop down list, we have a range of different control schemes that we can choose. We have the Blender control scheme, the 3ds Max scheme and the Maya scheme. These are really presets that configure the keyboard shortcuts you're going to be using and the general controls that you use to control Blender. Now I'm going to be using the Maya preset, which will make the Blender controls mirror the Maya controls, and the reason I'm doing that is because Unity uses the Maya style controls. So when working with Blender and Unity together, I don't have to use two different control sets. I can use one control set throughout both applications, and that really makes my work a lot easier. Now, if it just so happens that your Blender interface is over here like this and you don't have that welcome screen visible, you can easily get it to display again by coming up here to the toolbar, clicking on the Blender logo, and that will display the help screen again, and you can revisit that interaction dialog box and choose Maya to select the Maya style controls. An alternative way you can set the control scheme is through the user preferences dialog, and you can get access to that by choosing File and moving down to User Preferences, or you can press Ctrl-Alt-U on the keyboard. That will display the User Preferences dialog, and you want to select the Input tab here, and from the Input tab you want to make sure that the Maya preset is selected in this drop-down list, and if you want to save that as your control scheme, your default scheme, if you want to make that a permanent fixture, then you want to click on the Save User Settings button here, and that will go ahead and make those settings permanent so that every time you restart Blender you'll be using the Maya style controls. Of course, if you actually want to come in and start configuring and customizing the controls even further, you can use these options in here to come in and set the controls to be whatever you want, but I'm going to leave the Maya style controls at their defaults and just exit the user preferences. And that's how we go ahead and set up the Maya style controls for Blender. Now I want to discuss the Blender user interface. Now many people are perfectly happy with the default theme and color scheme of the Blender interface, but I personally like my color scheme to be a bit darker. Right now you can see that the panels of the user interface are this mid-tone kind of grey, and that's a bit too bright for my taste. I prefer to darken it up a little bit. And I also like some of the objects in the scene to appear a little bit differently. For example, here I've got this cube. This is the default scene in Blender. Now I'm just going to select that cube in the viewport, and right now we're in object mode. But if I want to have a look at the vertices of this, I have to enter edit mode. Some applications call this sub-object mode or component mode, but Blender calls it edit mode. If I press tab on the keyboard, you can see here that we enter edit mode, and I can now access the vertices, edges and faces of this object. And I like my vertices to appear a little bit larger than they do right now. So I'm going to start tweaking these settings, and to do that I can move up to the User Preferences menu. I'll choose File, User Preferences, and this brings up the User Preferences dialog, and already I'm on the Themes tab, and I want to customize how this theme appears. Now I want to select a different theme, so I can choose the presets here, and for example I could choose Back to Black, and that really turns my interface really very dark indeed, and I don't like my interface quite that dark. There's the Blender 24X, this theme here, there's Hexagon, Ubuntu Ambience, but I'm going to choose the Elsian theme here, which is the middle option, and that's the kind of interface that I like in terms of darkness. So I think that's looking pretty good, but I also want to change how large the vertices in my viewport appear here. So I'm going to customize the 3D view, and you can see, let's just move this over into the screen a bit better and scroll down just a little bit here. And you can see that here we've got vertex size, and right now it's a size of 3. If I just move this over a little bit and start to increase the size, you can see in the viewport my vertices are increasing, and I think perhaps a size of 6 is about what I need. If I ever need to change them, of course I can just come back in and change them. So I'm going to accept these settings as they are and just choose Save User Settings, and I'm just going to exit this dialog, and I'm happy with these settings. And there I've customized the Blender interface to be just how I like it. So now we're almost ready to get started. There's just one more thing that I want to do regarding the Blender interface. In this course we're going to be doing a lot of modeling, a lot of UV mapping and texture work. But one thing we will not be doing is animation. Now you can see that in the default Blender user interface arrangement we have this bottom part of the screen here which is dedicated to animation. You can see the timeline here and some animation controls. We're never going to be using those controls at all, and I like to have as much screen space and real estate as I can. Now you can see up here in the toolbar that we have different user interface arrangements. Right now we're in the default arrangement. You can click on this button here to see the presets. We have the default arrangement, we have a compositing layout, we also have an animation layout, and we have a video editing layout. We've got a whole video sequencer here, and we've got the UV editing layout for defining the UV mapping of an object. Let's just go back to the default layout. But in this default layout, we've got this animation toolbar that we're never going to use, and I want to get rid of it completely so I get as much screen space as possible. So I'm going to create my own custom layout really, and to do that I'm going to choose this plus icon here, and I'm going to give this layout a name of modeling because we're going to be modeling in this layout. So I'll just accept that here, and now whenever I make a change to the user interface, it's going to be recorded into this modeling layout here. So I want to get rid of this animation toolbar completely, and to do that I move over here to the bottom left part of the 3D view. You can see here we've got this whole border which marks out the 3D view, and it's represented here by this 3D view preset. Now I want to click on the little diagonal arrows in that 3D view, click and hold the mouse button and pull down into the animation timeline, and you'll see that when I do that you get this arrow icon appear in the center here, and when that appears I want to release my mouse, and now that section, that whole animation window completely disappears, and now we've got this modeling screen, the 3D view, completely full screen here, and that is what I want. So now if I come out into any other view and I return back to the modeling preset, we've got our interface exactly how we want it. So now it's configured and ready for modeling. All I need to do now is just save my file by choosing File, Save, and I can save my file to whatever I like, and these user interface presets are saved with my file. So now we're good to go. Okay, so now let's get started at creating our modular environment assets. I have a default Blender scene open in front of me here that I've saved, and we're here in the modeling user interface preset that we have created. We've got a nice lot of screen space here that we can use. Now to get started at creating the modular environments, really we need to think about every single one of the pieces in the set as being a tile in a grid, and we create the modular set by just piecing together the different tiles. Now if we think about it like that, you can see that if the tiles are going to match up and all fit together nicely, then they all need to be exactly the same size as each other, or they need to be multiples of the same size. And so that's what we're going to be doing here. We're going to use this cube as our kind of base tile, the starting point from which we're going to make all of the environment pieces. So what I want to do here is to position and size this tile appropriately so that everything else can be made to fit with it and it will match up. So right now I want to just position this cube. We always want to model at the world origin, and this cube right now is positioned at the world origin, but you can see that the pivot point of this cube is right at the center of this cube here, and actually I don't want that. I want the pivot point to be down here at the center of the floor. Now I can change this by just dragging on the gizmo up axis and moving the cube here, but notice that it moves in a continuous way. It doesn't snap nicely to the grid. It's not going to fit nicely to the grid floor if we do it this way. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z to undo it. I want to activate the snapping feature of Blender, and in this course we're going to be using a snapping a lot just to make everything match up. So to activate snapping, I'm going to click on this magnet icon here at the bottom. So let's just click on the magnet icon. And then here in this drop-down list, I want to choose the type of snapping that I'm going to use. So select that, and I want to make sure that we're using incremental snapping, and select that. And that will make sure that when I move this cube, it's going to move in nice discrete increments, one world unit at a time. So I'm going to just move this up, and straight away you can see now that the cube is aligned exactly to the floor. The base of this cube is aligned to the floor. But you'll see that the pivot point now is not at the world origin, it's offset from the world origin. So what I want to do is to realign the object's pivot point to the grid floor here. Now you can see I've got this sort of crosshair icon This represents the 3D cursor, which just marks a point in the 3D scene. By default, it's aligned to the world origin. I can actually change the position of this cursor by right-clicking anywhere in the scene to reposition the cursor. But it just so happens that I want it at the world origin. So let's set it back to the world origin. To do that, I can choose Object, Snap, and then choose Cursor to Center, and that will put the 3D cursor back to the world center here. And what I want to do is align this pivot of this object to the point where the world cursor is. So to do that, I'm going to choose Object. We have to make sure here that this box is selected in the scene. It is, and I can tell that because of the orange border painted around it. So I'm going to choose Object, Transform, and Origin to 3D Cursor. And that will align the pivot point of this object now to the 3D cursor. So if I move this box, you can see it's still at the base of the cube here. So everything's aligned there nicely. We've got this pivot point at the base of the cube, and that's aligned just as we want it. But what about the size of the cube? Is this the size that we want? Well, no, I don't think that this is the size that I want. Now, in Blender, there is a one-to-one correspondence between the units in Blender and the units in Unity. So we can know automatically that whatever we model in Blender, it will appear at the same size in Unity. And both of them use meters. So one world unit corresponds effectively to 1 meter. Now, if I click on this little plus icon here at the side and I pull this out to the left, we can begin to have a look at the dimensions of the cube. You can see we have the 0 position here. This is the location, is at the world origin. Its rotation is 0, its scale is 1. But here we have the dimensions of the cube, and it is 2 by 2 by 2. And I really want to just change those dimensions. I'm going to change it to 4 by 4 by 3. And you may wonder, why those dimensions? How did I arrive at those figures? Well, I really got to these by trial and error. I would create this cube, export it into Unity, test it out, and see whether I thought it was correct. Now, that takes a bit of trial and error, but that's how I got to these figures. But notice that the figures are round numbers. They are not decimal numbers. So I've not used, for example, 3.15. I've used nice rounded numbers, and I recommend that you always try to keep to the nice rounded numbers wherever possible. So I'm using 4 by 4 by 3, and that's going to be the size of our base tile, which means effectively that any other tile we create should either be this size or multiples of it. So that's how we can go about positioning and sizing our base tile.